Welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show, the podcast that brings together industry leaders to discuss the latest trends, insights and strategies. So sit back and relax, let's get inspired by the amazing women who are shaping the future of professional women in Australia. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
So welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show. I'm Lyn Hawkins, Founding Director of Business Women Australia, and I'm streaming live from the beautiful lands of the Binjarab people who've lived, danced and celebrated on rich estuaries around me and the waterways for tens of thousands of years before my people arrived. I found out recently that Mandurah, known in Noongar as Manjagoodrup, was a significant location for trade and gatherings, and that's not surprising, but it's also known as the meeting place of the heart. Now, that could not be more perfect, given that today's show, I've got the wonderful Wendy Harper on the show with us. So if you're listening now on LinkedIn, Meta, YouTube, or catching up on iTunes or Spotify, you are in for a treat. Hey, Wendy, you're the advisory board chair. I'm so fortunate to have you as our chair of Business Women Australia. You're the founder of the Agency for Women. You're also co-convener of IDG Australia Hub's collaboration, co-founder and director of PLab, a transformation leadership consultant and a working group member for Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index. So clearly you're one that makes a difference and you walk your talk, and you've made such a heart-centred impact on BWA already. I'm so delighted to have you on the show.
Thanks, Lyn. It's I've been so heartened with meeting you and Business Women Australia for the heart that it's bringing into leadership and opening up the space for, you know, the flourishing of women in business and leadership roles, rather than this releasing instead of constraining. So I think this is one of the beauties for me about Business Women Australia and what I love about it.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw your LinkedIn profile and I thought, I'm going to get on very well with this soul sister, because I think we both had that one of our purpose in life is to bring more love into the world. Wendy, tell us a little bit about your background and how did you learn to listen to that deep inner call that shaped your sense of purpose?
I think, Lyn, it's fair to say that it was something that was pretty much innate within me, and the circumstances around me growing up really helped to focus. You know, I've emerged out of generational violence, and the lives of women, you know, and women in my lineage, it was really clear to see that there was such an inequity and unfairness and high cost to being a woman in the world. And so when I was 7, I mean, between, you know, being the first generation exposed to media, this is in, you know, going back to the 60s, because I'm a few decades under my belt now. You know, it's that first generation exposed to the media, to news stories about what else was happening in the world. It was the time of the youth revolution, you know, with the Beatles and the music and rock and roll. It was also the time of, you know, the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know, all those assassinations that were happening. I think looking at home and looking out at the world, I just really sat with myself one day and looked out and said, there must be a better way for people who say they love one another to treat one another. So literally since the age of 7, that has been my sense of purpose driving me in everything that I'm doing.
And you've recently established, or in the process of getting all the platforms up for the Agency for Women. You know, I've been so inspired by, you know, this purpose that underpins the Agency for Women. Tell us about that and how did it come about?
Yeah, I'd been ideating it for quite a few years. When we look at, if I just go back to that story, it's like one of the ways that I learned, you know, I worked in death and dying when I was very young, originally trained as a nurse, and where I trained was in a death and dying facility. And it became very clear to me 6 months in that I was in a sickness industry, not a health and well-being industry. And so I really started to explore and investigate. This is like going back to 1977. What was well-being and wellness all about, and in those explorations about the different modalities of healings, things we all take for granted now, but for back then, was still all very new and very fringe, and we didn't really have a language or any science or data or evidence around it. However, the movement to explore and develop our inner capacities is where we have so much reserve resource. And so when, fast forwarding now, realizing, at that age, people didn't die wondering about the boat, the car, the shares, none of those things. When people are dying, the only thing they're talking about is their regrets around love and relationship. And that's why I think you and I share this understanding of that love is the most important thing. And it's only now just coming to the fore now, where love-based leadership is actually a recognized thing in the field of leadership and transformation in organizations around the world. It is a wave that's coming. And when we look at the capacities that make that possible, well, they're the inner reserves that we have. And so I went looking for a formula. Well, how can we help grow more of these inner capacities in the world? If we're going to have a peaceful, sustainable future, if that's achievable, it's not achievable if those inner dimensions and mindsets that we're bringing into every situation we're engaging, if we're bringing a whole lot of unresolved things within ourselves into play. And we can't separate ourselves. There's no leaving ourselves at home when we go to work. We bring all of ourselves into those situations. And so the more we're able to cultivate and integrate our inner capacities, then the more likely we are to be contributing much more integrated and compassionate and well thought out ways of engaging with others, in the capacities that we have. So the Agency of Women went looking for, okay, what's a formula that could bring all this together and help support and build growing more love in the world. And I came back and rested with collaboration is the core skill that we all need. And in building those collaborative capacities, because in order to have successful collaborations, and now in terms of sustainability transformations and cultural shifts and changes and developments that we need for, equality for women and for the LGBTQI communities, etc., we're having to broaden our base and range of like what we're drawing from. And so all of those things, if we look at what does it come down to for successful relating, especially in those areas that are sensitive, it comes down to being able to build relationships of trust. And relationships of trust are built out of the willingness to be vulnerable and share honestly. So honesty builds the trust that builds the safety that makes successful collaboration possible, but it also is the same ingredients that help make more love possible as well. We can only open our hearts and feel if we feel safe, and if we have that trust, and that trust is based on is am I being honest with myself, and am I being honest with others, and is that being reciprocated? That's our measure of trust and how much we invest in relationships, whether they're personal or business. They're still going through that same filter. So the Agency of Women brings together just a whole lot of levers. One is when we look at where our reserve resources are for peace and sustainability, the data says that a huge resource is in the social leadership capacity of women. Now, we've made a lot of advances in the more developed worlds for, equal pay and gender rights and all of those things. So the Agency of Women focuses on the underserved women in the world. There are 2 billion women in the world who are living in remote and grassroots communities who don't have access to any of the privileges that we have. And when I'm talking privileges, I'm simply talking about the right to express our agency, to be purpose-driven beings, and to have the support we need to help transform our communities. Because in a lot of ways, in this space on the ground, who are the change leaders who are creating those kind of impacts? most of them are women. We have the stats to back that up. So we know that there's a great capacity within women to also help lead that capacity building for these underserved women, and whether that's in grassroots community, because the other underserved area is within elder women, and all the social relational intelligence that they've accumulated over a lifetime that can be now brought back into the system and replenish the system with that kind of wisdom and long-termism views, and to prioritize, social relational and values as a basis for communicating, relating, and taking action. So that's the Agency of Women serves those women, but the Agency of Women has been set up to provide opportunities for people of talent and the ESG resources within organisations to be able to contribute their talent and engage directly in collaborations with these underserved women. So we've got this huge reserve resource capacity within organisations that we know is there, this huge resource reserve within the social leadership capacity of women. And then we've also got this huge resource within ourselves for the inner capacities that are yet to be developed within everyone, to be able to bring those forward so that we're contributing and acting through those into the system. So we can leverage huge impact in the world by through the Agency of Women, through supporting women-led projects in these underserved communities, and contribute for anybody who feels the need, they want to contribute to a better future but not sure how, well, provides all those people of talent with an opportunity to come and contribute their effort onto that leverage point, which can create a huge shift in the world for peace and sustainability. So that's the logic model behind the Agency of Women.
It really is very aligned with, the purpose that I'm seeing Business Women Australia coming to understand after 10 years of building this community and the platforms to be able to hook into the extraordinary work that the Agency of Women is doing and about to do is really exciting. Now, you've mentioned the SDGs. Now, for those of our listeners who I thought I was pretty familiar with United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. So this is what Wendy's referring to. The SDGs are those United Nations Sustainability Goals. Our colleagues who are in the ESG, the Environmental Society Governance space, will know about those. What I thought I knew was very, very basic, and I'm starting to get a deeper understanding of that and thinking more around what the practicalities are for our organisation and for our members, companies and businesses to be thinking about those sustainability goals in a more practical implementation way rather than sort of theoretically being supportive. And you talked there about the IDGs, which are the inner development goals and the development of self. And if I sort of bring it back to our sort of understanding of self-leadership, we can only lead others if we know and have awareness around ourselves, our own self-leadership. And this is where I've really enjoyed that, that understanding of the connection between what the inner development capacities have and that framework that is available through the inner development capacity, the IDGs that are attached to the UN Sustainability Goals, that section. And then what that means for me as a leader, and what are the capacities and the awareness that I need to be more aware of, and it's a work in progress. I think perhaps, this incredible influence that you're having in guiding and mentoring Business Women Australia is really going to help us, go from being good to great and having more impact. And I think that's where our listeners might be very interested in how you see us aligning with those UN sustainability goals and how that IDG framework can work, and why that's important for organisations in Australia, no matter what size the business.
For starters, I just want to acknowledge that no system is perfect. And there are so everything I'm going to say, I just want to park this in front to say, look, there's been a lot of for the UN has gone through a lot of difficult times, and the Sustainable Development Goals also, are not 100% perfect. So parking that in front. Now, what I will say about them is that if 193 countries around the world can get together and agree on anything, then it provides a baseline upon which to build that which is needed in the world. So I see the Sustainable Development Goals as a baseline framework that's solid, which has the support of all of those nations around the world. And in Australia, we have been slow on the pickup to adopting or even having any government supported messaging around the Sustainable Development Goals because, as you know, we've had a lot of discordance in our political world around climate. And I think this has meant that there's been reticence about promoting them up front from a government point of view. That's starting to shift now. And so the Sustainable Development Goals provide a basis upon which we can all move forward towards sustainability. It lets us know what the targets need to be, and it provides that guide rails. The slow progress towards achieving them, though, was recognised, and what was recognised is that we just simply lack the inner capacities required to meet those complex challenges. And so the IDGs began and was a movement born out of that recognition, and was kickstarted through through the Stockholm Business School and through the Harvard Flourishing School, with inputs from different leaders in those fields around the world. And what they launched was a research project where they brought together an open source research project of over 1,000 academic researchers from around the world to come up with a framework that could support developing the inner capacities required to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's how the IDGs were born. It's an evolving framework. It is a living framework that will continue to be updated. It's open source. It's freely available to everyone. And it operates at such a high level. So when we look at the Australian context, organisations here are speaking about sustainability and mindset. There's the understanding of both those things. Part of the sustainability equation is we now have the big stick of the Australian accounting sustainability reporting standards that were recently passed, which is now a requirement level of policy to have transparency around our sustainability reporting. And so that big stick has kind of like been a wake-up call for organizations to think, well, how is this going to impact them? Well, it's going to impact everyone, and that impact is coming. So it's organizations have really started to embrace and grapple with that challenge. And the mindset side of that is also well recognized, that in order to go on that sustainability journey, transition and cultural shift within an organization, we need to be able to shift mindset so that we can bring everybody along with us. The question is how to shift mindsets. Now, mindsets are very individual because they live in the minds of each person and they're totally unique. So here is a high-level framework, the Inner Development Goals framework, which can provide guidance for and an evidence base to start having those conversations in the workplace about how do we develop and shift mindsets. One of the things I do is I bring collaboration gyms to organizations for exactly that reason. We use gamified learning environments to help that movement happen. For people to be having fun, learning and growing these capacities is really important. And that helps create a culture where we understand that building more of these collaborative capacities is exactly what we need in cross-functional teams, for innovation across different sectors. We need now to be building this collaborative capacity to be able to do more with less faster, because the condition of the world is requiring us to action and find solutions quickly, and we need to learn to pivot faster. The pivoting if we watch a football match, for example, like I'm not a football fan particularly, but, I am blown away at the high level of modern football when we see this flow of passing the ball in incredible poetry and flow of motion. Well, this is a demonstration of what's possible for human beings to be. What level of collaboration is it possible to achieve with other humans? Well, that's a great example of that's what's possible. And there's no reason why we can't have that level of flow and magic happen in the workplace and with others. But, collaboration is like a muscle that it needs exercising. And we need exercising through practical application. And that's why gamified learning is really important, because we can get that practice. We can go into the collaboration gym. We can develop those muscles so that when we get out on the field, like the workplace, and get out there, then we already are bringing all that developed capacity with us. And through our interactions, we are leading, demonstrating that shift in action in the way that we are collaborating and dealing with other people in our team. So, this authentic, lived, exercised inner capacity building is what's required to lead people through these difficult times and challenges. There's a lot of uncertainty, in that sense of a VUCA world. And this is where I see the IDG's framework as being a gift. Like, it is the framework for this time. And for anybody in the workplace who's facing these kind of challenges, leading teams, shifting cultures, the Inner Development Goals framework provides, such a fabulously research-based resource that can be referred to, so that if there's any pushback, you've got lots of evidence to support bringing in something new. And if we don't bring in something new, then it's that old adage, then we're just going to keep repeating what's happened in the past.
Absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about the IDGs and the inner work that I can do through the cafe conversations that you're launching with BWA on the first Tuesday of every month. So for our listeners, we'd love to see you online for our cafe conversations for change leaders. And that's going to be another opportunity for us to explore together in the safety of our Business Women Australia Vault, our Courageous Conversations format. But tell us about the Agency of Women and the work with it's the Matinga women who are leading sort of what seems to be a national movement.
Yeah, it's Mittengar.
Mittengar,
yep. Mittengar. And this is Mittengar is the brainchild, the vision child of Mary Jack, who is an elder, a First Nations elder in Vanuatu, who has been championing the empowerment and uplifting of the grassroots women in Vanuatu for over 40 years. And, the serendipity is I'd been in Vanuatu, I'd been embedded in the villages, actually on the same island that Mary's from. But at that time, Mary was away working, in projects away from her island. And so we didn't meet. But in 2020, Mary reached out, and I'd already ideated the Agency of Women. I already knew that this was the direction to go in. We did need a pilot project, but I hadn't even got to the point of going, yes, we need a pilot project, and where could that pilot project be? Because Mary got in first. And Mary rang me. We had a conversation, and basically, in essence, whilst what we don't understand about Vanuatu is that, imagine it's a nation of islands, and of those 120 or so islands, there's 83 of them that are inhabited. So all of those islands are separated, obviously by water. That's what makes them islands, but they're all separate. They separate the people from one another. In 2015, when Cyclone Pam wiped out Tanna Island in Vanuatu, it also ripped up the marine cable. So they've had no cable for communications over there, and are now completely reliant on mobile network, which is very patchy, inconsistent. And in Vanuatu is not on a shipping lane, so that it means that, we really have to go there intentionally. There can't be things dropped off on the way to somewhere. So it makes it a very expensive place to be able to bring resources to. And so for the women over there, Mary just simply got to the point where relying on international aid organizations only to come over and provide support often left the women feeling like they come and they go, they fulfill their own agenda, but really nothing changes on the ground for the women. And so Mary rang me and said, what I want to do is I want to actually see it change on the ground for the women. And the only way to do that is to help the women build the social leadership capacities within themselves that they lack because they live in a cultural environment that hasn't supported their development in that area. So Mary said, what I want to do is set up a national grassroots women's organization to connect all the women across all the islands together and to be able to give them a seat at the national decision-making table so their voices can be heard, and that we, on their behalf, as a membership-based organization, we can then go and apply for funding directly from all of these international, of course, with the International Court of Justice recently ruling on the Vanuatu case, where those young students from Vanuatu went to the International Court of Justice to say that the consequences of climate change for Vanuatu must be the responsibility of those companies and corporations that have created the climate issue, and that they're the most vulnerable nation on earth. And so the International Court of Justice agreed. It's a finding, it's not a ruling, but it agreed with that responsibility should flow on to those companies and organizations. It's a giant wake-up call for the world, and especially the world of business, to think that the decisions that we make today after that decision will be measured against that decision, possibly for later court action. So it's really sent a ripple effect through. And whilst the students took that case, it puts the spotlight on Vanuatu. But the reason we don't hear from the women's voices over there is because they don't have access to network. They don't have the budget for data. They don't have the phones and free use of phones. So it's quiet because it's not that they don't have a lot to say and a lot they want to be heard about. It's just we don't hear them because the mute button is down, and we need to be able to provide them the opportunity for their voices to be heard, to be able to go and get their own funds to run their own projects, because this is the only way they're going to build the inner capacities, the leadership capacities, the understandings, the governance understandings, to develop, to run projects, to run micro businesses. That's all the capacity building that these women now want to do, and are calling upon us here in Australia, reaching out to their neighbours to say the women don't want to travel this road alone anymore. We need help. And that was Mary's call to me. And I've responded to Mary because I can see how helping the women grow and develop in this way, in their own women-led way, in a culturally sustainable way, that they get to grow a path and gradient into transforming their whole nation in a culturally sustainable way that is supportive of everyone, because the women only wants best for the community. They're not just out for themselves. So this is a nation building exercise for Vanuatu, and this is an opportunity for many people to put a very small amount of energy, effort, or resource onto a leverage point that can uplift a whole nation. And the model that we produce there can then be shared with other grassroots women around the world, for them to develop their own grassroots women's organizations at national levels to connect all their women. And ultimately, I see a global connection between all of these grassroots women's nations around the world. So we start to hear these women's voices, and this is 2 billion women we're talking about. Now, if we're able to elevate those voices, starting with Vanuatu, and look, even I'm just happy, even if we got Vanuatu done, like put up the glasses, it's an incredible legacy that we can all help the women build. I'm a servant leader to Mary. I'm here literally. She comes, knocks on the door of the Agency of Women. I open the door. What do you need? And then I go to the supermarket of the world to find what we need, so the women have got what they need to develop their organization. And this next 3 years is critical. We need to set up all the organizational infrastructure. That means when network is unreliable, we need to have satellite communications. And so in this next three the first year, we're setting up the satellite communications. We are starting to link all the women across all the islands through sister circles that extend back out, because it's nothing like here, Lyn. Like when we think about what's possible to do here, we could send out an email. No, you can't send out an email. You know, we can run to reach all those women in those remote communities. No, it's going to rely on a person to person. These women have got to travel out and set up sister circles in every village that they have relations with, so that in those sister circles, we've already done our prototyping on the island of Tanna, so we know this system works, to get that feedback reaching right out to the women in the remotest communities and getting that feedback through their sisters all the way back to the island head office. And then that'll go to provincial head office. There's 5 provinces in Vanuatu. And then that's how we get to bring the national conversation together. But it means that all the women are actually connected on that women's web across Vanuatu. We can only achieve that if we can get the support we need to help the women put the infrastructure in place, to do the training, to have the staff, to set up the organizational infrastructure, to set up the communications. But we've done everything necessary to prepare for that. Mittengar is a registered not-for-profit organization in Vanuatu. We have a wonderful local and very credible, governing board. I'm an international member of that board. As the Agency of Women, I've partnered with the Global Development Group here in Australia, who is auspicing for us and providing tax-deductible donation from Australia, New Zealand, the United States, the UK, the Netherlands even, and maybe other countries in Europe. So we have this broad base now to be able to draw from. But more importantly, with the Global Development Group, they take care of all the financial reporting to the Australian federal government. So that's a big thing. People can rest assured that they also have a caseworker that is attached to Mary and the organisation. So they provide governance support. So everybody involved, I guess, can be rest assured that what we're doing, it's not about one project. What we're doing is we're helping the women build the infrastructure, which is going to support many hundreds, if not thousands, of projects that the women can run themselves. So they're no longer reliant on the vagaries of international aid or organisations coming or going. They can actually prioritise their own projects. They're incredibly intelligent, resilient, resourceful women. Often they have 4 languages: English, French, Bislama, and their local village dialect. They are incredible people. What they don't have, what they lack, is the kind of connectedness that we take for granted. And if we can help them have that, fill that gap, then we are providing them with the capacity to build the future that they imagine possible for their nation, to build the resilience they need in the face of these escalating climate impacts.
Yeah, it's an important project, and I know it's one that really drives you. It's in the back of your mind all the time. Whenever I catch up with you, you really are feeling this sense of urgency as well. So our listeners who might be thinking about how can they be involved, what can they do to assist Mary and the women of Vanuatu with this incredible infrastructure development project and an ability to have a system where they can be very self-determined in how they solve their problems?
So it's going back to where we started in this conversation about love, Lyn. What the women feel they need a family of friends around them. They need people who feel a connection with their story and what they're trying to achieve, to be able to come around them and help support their efforts. And that includes, yes, we need to fundraise, and we've got a Kickstarter going for, to raise $50,000 to provide the funding for the first year to get all of the infrastructure in place that's needed for the organisation to grow and develop. And, when we look at it, it's not a huge amount of money when we look at it as a nation building exercise. The budgets for years 2 and 3 is year 2 is 60,000, year 3 is 70,000. So all up, it's the project, all the project requires is 180,000 to build that outcome. And in that period of time, Mittengard will be then in the position to be able to apply for and receive its own funding from those same international sources, because it is the national grassroots women's organisation. So we have no doubt that its sustainability pathway is in place. We just need to bridge it from here to there. And so, in whatever way anyone who's listening might have some resource and think, well, I'd really love to be making a difference towards something, and here is something really tangible, really real on the ground, where I get to connect with the women themselves, because we're making time available with Mary, to spend online together once we get the satellite communications up and running, but to have that time together so that we are sharing and exchanging a real values-based experience. We are building this together with the women. That's why I'm talking about family and I'm talking about love. It's not something at a distance. It's something that we have a choice to sit very closely with, and sit closely with the women, at whatever distance we choose. But so much about what we get out of the difference making that we can do is through the direct relationship with the people who are on the ground doing that work, and what we learn and gain from them. Because the culture of the Nevan people, they're like battling every year for the title of the happiest nation on earth, in the Gross National Happiness Index, for example. They have something that we need, and being able to help them helps us. And I think helps us more than it helps them, actually, if we treasure that kind of a feeling that arises when we know we're part of something bigger, making a difference, and having that sense of purpose nourishes our souls. And also, if we're looking at the future for peace and sustainability, here's something that's really practical that we can leverage our effort with others to make a real impact, that we can sit back on later and go, we were part of that team that did that.
So there's a fundraising effort that is being launched as we speak, and for anyone who wants to help with fundraising or with their own time, with their resources, there's so much that you need help with in establishing the Agency of Women and getting it to scale. They can find you on the Business Women Australia website, on LinkedIn, and on the agencyofwomen.org website. Reach out to Wendy, have a conversation, be generous with your skills. Even if you're at a stage, if you're an aspiring leader and can't afford the fundraising side of it, your skills and your talent can be used in a way that's going to help really make a difference. For those of you who have a philanthropic foundation, or you're happy to be supporting from a charitable point of view, this is such a worthy cause, and it will make a difference to a whole nation, a nation who's kind of been out of the spotlight because their satellite communications have been destroyed through that cyclone. And it's not that they haven't got a lot to say, it's just that they haven't got the infrastructure for us to hear what they have to say. And for us, the benefits are enormous. The friendships, the family that we can extend beyond the borders to our beautiful neighbours in Vanuatu. What a way to do it. We know for a fact that when you help a community, and the women in those communities, the exponential effect is magnified, because the women are so always thinking about the future generations and the best benefits of the communities long term. What an incredible project. What a great purpose. Thank you so much, Wendy, for bringing this to our attention and for connecting Business Women Australia to something that's really going to make a difference to our world and to the world of these wonderful women and their families.
And I just want to add and say that the Agency of Women is all about making this fun, a fun, growing and exciting experience, because the work that's being done and the way we engage and this understanding about inner development is what we share about with everyone who's joining the agency and playing a part and playing a role, is actually to have the opportunity to be in a community with people who are learning and growing their growth mindsets and applying those in the field to practical projects for making a difference. It's a really beautiful place to be. Thank you.
It is, and I know for a fact anything that you have a hand in, Wendy, is fun. Yes. There's no doubt about it. Thank you so much for being on the show. We'll get you back on to the show, I think, early next year and see how things are progressing. For those of you who want to connect at a regular level, join Businesswomen Australia's Change Leaders Cafe conversations facilitated by Wendy every month on the first Tuesday of every month. And if you're not already a member of Businesswomen Australia, we'd love for you to consider joining. We have connector memberships, leader memberships, we've got partnerships and sponsorships, and Wendy's also looking for partners and sponsors and members of the Agency of Women as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with as you wrap up?
I just think it's, the authenticity of our leadership is the agency that we have in life, and not just in work, but in every level and layer of our lives. It's like it's really getting to know who we are and being able to confidently bring all of ourselves into what we're doing, and that if there's any area of life that we feel needs more building up or supporting, then it's important for the health of our whole life and the empowerment of like what we're doing in our leadership roles, to have that sense of center and self and confidence. And if we're feeling uncertain in certain areas of ourselves, then that is a point where we can't feel confident. So it's that whole person approach to looking at not just leading in one area and being out of balance like peers and foundations that are unequal and uneven, but to really look at how do I bring all of myself up so that I'm being in the world with all of me, bringing all of me to everything that I'm doing and being and creating.
No, absolutely. Very wise words. Thank you so much, Wendy. And thank you for being in my life. You've made an extraordinary difference to me, and I really appreciate that. I love you to death. I can't wait to organise my cocktail party. My online cocktail party to help raise this issue amongst my family and friends, and I'll get you on as my special guest before I head off onto annual leave. And I'm thinking I might even link in. They have to buy a ticket to the cocktail party to come along, and we're going to have lots of games. We can have some fun games. You and me can organise some games. So if you want to be invited to my cocktail party, where we're going to have some fun and games and do a beginning and then see how you might be then able to run a cocktail party of your own with your family and friends, reach out to me and I might invite you along to my cocktail party too. So
and just to be clear that the cocktail party is, I'm a special guest and I can share about the project, what the women are doing. And that's what the cocktail's about. But let's have fun doing it and bring family and friends together and have something really purposeful to engage and explore.
I love it. I think I've actually got the 13th of November. So keep an eye on that, everyone. If you're listening to this, pencil out the 13th of November from 5 o'clock West Coast time. That'll be daylight savings, 8 o'clock for an hour. We'll jump online, bring your favourite cocktail. I might even get everyone to wear a silly hat because I've got some really silly hats I want to show you. And we'll have a lot of fun, and I'll sell some tickets that will directly go into the beginning of the fundraising, and then we can chat about how we can actually turn this into a massive nationwide cocktail party.
Yes.
Just like a progressive dinner party. It just goes from one place to another with different hosts running it with their family and friends. Wouldn't that be cool?
And if life isn't a rolling cocktail party, why not?
Absolutely. Well, you know me, I just love to think I'm paid to party. So Thanks for being on the show, and we'll keep this conversation going, Wendy.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Have a happy day.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Spread the news about Businesswomen Australia's podcast show, And if you have been thinking about joining, now is the time. Not only have we got more events than ever in all our capital cities, but we have the Change Leaders Cafe Conversations the first Tuesday of every month, and we've got our Virtual Members Connect on the last Thursday of every month. So many opportunities to develop, so many opportunities to connect, and we'd love for you to join us. We'll see you on the show next time.
You have been listening to the Business Women Australia podcast show. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode and gained some valuable insights to empower you on your journey. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to stay updated in our latest episodes. And if you're not already a member of Business Women Australia, what are you waiting for? Head to our website today and join so that you can connect with a thriving community of inspiring women across Australia. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.